Okay, so imagine it's show and tell day at school and you swear that you're about to bring the most amazing thing to show off. But when it's time for show and tell, some dude brings his uncle and it's literally Snoop Dogg himself about to put on a concert for the class. Now that might sound a little extra, but that's how I'm thinking that Guerrilla Games must feel about the Horizon series. Not once, but twice does this game release right at the same time as a more popular open world RPG. The first of them being Breath of the Wild, the game that took the world by storm and spawned an entire subgenre of its own. With the second time being alongside Elden Ring, yet another game that had the entire internet between its fingers. No pun intended. So I'm not gonna lie, I do feel bad for Guerrilla Games because they keep getting cucked every time they release some heat. Which does suck since I think the Horizon games are something that everyone should experience. With this game being the second in the series, it stands in a position where it has to be an evolution of the original without being too different. The question is if it's enough of an evolution to make it unique though. While I do have some amazing things to say about Forbidden West, I can't say that everything was what I expected it to be. You see, the first game was great. Amazing story, fun characters, deep dialogue, and don't even get me started on the designs for those machines. Even to this day, I look back at the first gameplay trailer where they fought the Thunderjaw and I get chills. Horizon Zero Dawn started off as a game that I was hyped for, and I even got the collector's edition with the statue. And by the end of that game, it proved itself to be so much deeper than I ever expected. The combat was intuitive, the side quests were heartfelt, and the main story was full of twists. So how could the sequel possibly screw that up? Well, the interesting part about that is that it didn't screw it up. As a matter of fact, it is such a good game that there's not much more to say outside of what the original delivered. Forbidden West takes everything that you know and love from Zero Dawn and it amplifies it just a bit more. An even larger open world, more crazy machine designs, a deeper dive into the story, and even more dialogue with the characters. And I mean a lot of dialogue.
Well, yes, sort of.
Quite possibly too much dialogue at times. It's something I noticed at first, but it didn't hit me until Video Game Donkey said the same thing in his video.
I just got done playing Pokemon, which had the exact same problem, so I was already beyond my limit with this shit. The story and characters are very generic, and then when they're finally done talking, the game prompts you to start asking them a bunch of questions. What fucking sicko is actually going to hit the more dialogue button when it takes characters 20 minutes just to shut the fuck up in the first place?
And yeah, I know, Donkey isn't exactly the star example of who to listen to for video game opinions, but I can't lie, I agree with him on that take. I'm not the person who's interested too much in dialogue, especially when you have that wheel of options to choose from. Like sometimes it's cool when you're super invested in a storyline, but other times I just can't wait to get out of there and get back to the fighting and exploring. Now that is good news for the people who love connecting with the characters. Side quests are the staple of what makes this game stand out. It expands the world beyond what the story wants you to see, and it adds depth to this new place. There's so many unique NPC characters here dealing with troubles within their own separate tribes. And it feels like this is a world that is thriving with culture. Each tribe has their own set of rules for how they handle themselves, and you see how these issues affect each of the people that you come in contact with. Like how one tribe uses seed bags as a way of remembering someone after their death. There's so much more Native American imagery here than I even saw in the first game, but of course with the mechanical twist on it. So I really feel like the devs took the energy to do this entire world justice and make this into an even more authentic experience than before. And for anyone who loves that kind of stuff, you're going to have a blast with the story. But outside of that, I've had this odd feeling during my playthrough. Something that I felt was missing from Forbidden West. Like that major wow factor that gets me more excited to play as I keep going. And don't get me wrong, Forbidden West is a pretty decent game. Maybe not a Game of the Year winner of course, but absolutely a contender. It's like the game is good to an extent where it's what I expected it to be. It's doing everything better than the original, but somehow isn't blowing me away. Is it because the stakes of the story aren't as interesting now? That could be a reason. Without spoiling too much, I felt that the major surprises that came from Zero Dawn were going to be hard to top, and to an extent I was right. The plot here still digs deeper into the overall lore of what made this post-apocalyptic world with tribes of people hunting machines, but it lacks those major plot twists that the original brought with it. What Forbidden West does best with its plot is introduce new enemies that I thought would be the major turning point in the game, but sadly we don't get to fight them in the way that I was hoping we would throughout the entire game. I will admit that it is nice seeing how these different tribes interact with each other and the power struggles that happen around them, but so much of that seems less interesting after seeing what the newer enemies are bringing to the table. I don't know, maybe that's a nitpick on my part, but I was so excited to have boss battles with these guys, just to find out that they're not even here for 10% of the game. Plus, we can talk about their machines as well, but I'll get back to that in a moment. So let's just say maybe it isn't the story that I felt was lacking. Well, is it that the new additions to the gameplay aren't that mind-bending and daring? And to an extent, I guess. The original Horizon had a lot of weapons to use for hunting down both people and machines. Anywhere from traps to bows and arrows and even slingshots. Many of those weapons made it into the sequel, but some of the new ones are pretty interesting. Like your spear that gives you a lot more options for combos, or canisters that you can shoot on the enemies and create an even larger elemental explosion. A lot of these things I actually didn't use much, but the fact that there's so many options makes this into something that you can make your own. The skill tree this time around focuses heavily on 6 different areas of your kit, and if you're like me, you may not even use half of these areas as much, like with overriding machines and setting up traps. That's mainly because those aren't exactly my style, but the variety of what you can choose is bountiful. Because maybe you are someone who likes to be more stealthy and plan out your attacks carefully. They have each tree sectioned out well so you can make sure that you can focus on your best playstyle without going too far off track. With your health upgrades being tied to your level and all the outfit upgrades being separate too, you don't feel like you need to focus on one specific area. The major change in combat has to be the Valor abilities that you have in each tree. These are going to come in handy, especially depending on your playstyle. I liked having the abilities that focus on increasing my crit rate as well as increasing my damage for a short period of time. But there's also abilities that help with things like inflicting elemental damage as well, with one of my favorites being the burst of energy that you can shoot into the ground, damaging enemies all around you. And I'm sure you've all seen that one from the trailers at least. Going back to my point about what Forbidden West was missing, I think I can look towards other games to explain my feelings. For example, I'd take a look at God of War 3 and God of War Ascension. God of War 3 continues to be one of my favorite games of all time even to this day. With the graphics, the brutal animations, and the fun gameplay with new twists around every corner, it does not get old. I've finished that game at least 6 times now, and I'd be down to do a 7th run in the near future. But then you have the game that came right after that, God of War Ascension. And yeah, it's a decent game. It takes the gameplay of God of War 3 and rolls it along well with a story that isn't as exciting, but it gets the job done. You can tell this is where they found their stride with the series, but just couldn't get it to evolve much after what they did with 3. Which is probably a major reason why the series changed so much going into the most recent PS4 and PS5 games. But looking back now, I do think Ascension was made just for that weird multiplayer mode that had a paywall. Side note, but do y'all remember that shit? When Sony was out here not charging us for PS Plus, but decided it would be a cool thing to charge you for every individual first-party online game? So even if you bought the game used, you couldn't play online because you need to have a code that comes with the brand new game so you can play online. But of course, they'll sell that to you extra for $10. Now that's some scummy shit. But anyway, the point is that Ascension just wasn't the hype sequel that it could have been. And then here comes God of War PS4 to change up the entire formula and make this series feel fresh as a newborn Atreus.
There are consequences to saying the N-word.
What? How do you know? How do you know?
So why is it that Forbidden West gives me that feeling? Probably because it's feeling a bit too similar and familiar. The main differences being the tweaks to the combat and weapons and adding mechanics like a glider and pullcaster for more in-depth puzzles. Going back to the new enemies, that may have been the most interesting part of the game, but by the end my excitement for them gets thrown out the window. I won't go into heavy detail in case you want to play the game for yourself, but essentially, there are these new futuristic machines that you can fight. They're honestly pretty cool and they add a lot of layers onto the already deep storyline. But the worst part about them has to be the lack of variety that they have, which really sucks since the later parts of the game throws you into fighting basically the same machine back to back to back. So in a way, the game does a complete 180 on the concepts of combat that make it so interesting to begin with. When you think of Horizon, you automatically think about the multiple ways that there are to take down enemies and use your arsenal properly. You have all these bows and arrows and slingshots and bombs and traps at your disposal, not to mention the wide variety of elements to use along with each one. The game mostly gives you these options and wants you to put them all to good use throughout each battle. It creates a gameplay experience that's unique to your playstyle. But when you're forced to fight 10 of the same exact enemy back to back, it makes things feel so much more repetitive. Nearing the end of the game, I equipped myself with one weapon and used that one specific element and not only took down tons of these new enemies, but also one of the final bosses of the game. It felt like everything I built up to that point was completely tossed in the trash and useless, which defeats the point of the combat as a whole. Outside of that endgame combat, the overall experience brought me back to what I loved about playing Zero Dawn, creating an even further extended lore, more characters to connect with, and a bunch of new machines to rip to shreds. It definitely has to be one of my favorite games of 2022, so it does suck that it faded into the background after Elden Ring came out. If you've never played Forbidden West or the original Horizon Zero Dawn, absolutely try them out for yourself. Those are some of the games that you'd be a fool not to own if you have either a PS4 or a PS5. But if you have tried Forbidden West, tell me your thoughts on it in the comment section down below. Subscribe for more videos just like this one, and I'll see you all in the next video.